We're here at my studio, and I'm here to talk about one of the questions I get the most of, which is how to improvise. So, there are some basics and some obvious things. Essentially, you want to play a scale that conforms to a chord. Later on, we're going to do something that doesn't conform, but you have to learn the rules to break them, essentially. So here, if I just play a C chord, I can just play a C scale over it, meaning solo with a C scale. Right? So there were two chords in there, but you could do the exact so that's all tertiary, right? So this is how a lot of classical music is written, and when I say a lot, I mean like pre-romantic. It's a lot of it is based on scales. If you look at the song, for instance, by Bach. So there were basically two scales alluded to there. Here, that's all G major, right? So then on the left, so there he just exploited the 5 and then wound up going to 1. So I would like to think of that being based on the D scale because he's using it as the function of the 5. Anyway, if you want to learn how to improvise well, learn how to write well, basically, and read music too, work on Bach and Chopin and all those guys, because it's just like learning a language. Writing is the same thing as language. So let's get into the nitty gritty. So yeah, you could do that, and it sounds pretty and all. But if I'm in a rock setting, if I'm playing, or just something simple, sounds dumb, right? So that's where the blues scale comes in. It's a really good go-to for pianists. It's the equivalent of the pentatonic scale, essentially, for the guitar on the piano. A lot of us basically run to the blues. I'm one of them. But even in that instance, if I'm just playing this, I'm going to want to at least throw in a flat third. Okay, so generally all I do is play around with the flat third. I don't really use the F sharp as much unless it's something where I'm pivoting off of the 5. Like that sort of a thing. But personally I like the idea of skating, and skating is something where you use the same scale over multiple chords, especially with the blues. Right. So skating is okay, but there's also this idea of what we call playing inside the changes. So using a blues again, I would use the C blues scale for this. Don't know why I just played F4. Well, actually, I do know why, because I just wrote a song. I'll play a little bit of it for you, but yeah, that should have been F major. And then the G, blues scale there, sorry. Right. So all I'm doing is I'm switching to the new chord's key, essentially. And so typically I get asked things like, Randy, why do we have, Dorian mode and Mixolydian mode and Ionian mode? And the first thing I say is, look, I didn't invent this stuff, man. I just study it, okay? So don't blame me. But they ask, why do we have all these different modes when if you take a 2-5-1 in C, for example, all these notes in these chords are tertiary to the key of C. So what I did at the end was I used that blue note there in C, and that helped liven it up a bit, right? So that's really the answer, is what you're looking at when you're looking at that is a bunch of theoretical gobbledygook. The real thing you want to do is see how you can make the scale you're using unique or the solo unique. So that's why I pick skating. So there, I'm basically using a D blues scale that's minor, right? So when you add these blue notes into things, or even just do some half stepping, like I just played G sharp over G down here. Okay, that's what that chord is going to sound like. But I managed to make that sound okay because I did it fast enough. So theoretically, any note could work over any chord, right? It's the notes that you sit on that really count. So here's some stuff that you can do for rock. I'm a big ballad player. Is you can use basically, it's not even a pentascale, but 1, 2, 3, and 5, and you can invert okay, so there there again, I'm incorporating something outside of what I'm doing, and it makes it sound better. Another thing you can do is try to arrange things. You'll get a better idea for scales that way. It's like the step before composition. Let's see. I know I have an arrangement here that I've written. It's around here somewhere, son. Okay, so I don't know if this is the right title for the song. I get it mixed up with a Nirvana song, but this is the song, sometimes I feel like I don't have a partner. Sometimes I feel like my only friend is the city I live in, the city of angels. So what I did is I rearranged this song. I did what's called a reharmonization of it. And I know that a lot of this seems like it doesn't have much to do with improvisation, But remember, composition and arranging is just improvisation that you've written down. And you'll find after you rearrange something, it will be easier. So before I play my version of that song, let me show you a little bit of what I did as a kid. So when I was like 8 years old, I only knew 1, 4, and 5, right? I would just take patriotic songs because I was a silly little robot back then, and I would just play 1, 4, and 5 over them. So like, and now there are times when it doesn't fit right here. Okay, now I'm already doing too much, but you guys get the idea. So you can reduce everything down, really, when you think about it. So that's kind of what I did with Under the Bridge. That's an interesting... So I haven't played this in a while, so I'm trying to remember. That's probably what... Maybe make that 7. Okay, so this should be C over B flat. All right. Sometimes I feel like I don't have a partner. Yeah, so that's gotta be faster. Okay, so let's take a look at what I was doing. Playing a lot of this cluster here, and I'm using my flat third, which is my gimmick. Remember, that's my gimmick. You can't steal it. And then I'm just moving down here, and I'm using this little cluster of 3. I've more recently started to get into fourths. So it's just an interval. That's a second, that's a third, that's a fourth. 1, 2, 3, 4. Very difficult. Yeah. So yeah. Let's continue on with this. So. Sometimes I feel like I don't have a partner. Sometimes I feel like my only friend is the city I live in, the city of angels. Don't because I am together we child of streets, 'cause she's my companion. Walk through the hills, 'cause she knows who I am. She sees my good deeds and kisses me when they only as I am. Together we cry. Uh-oh, I'm not warmed up. I don't ever wanna feel like I did that day. Take me to the place I love. Take me all the way. I don't ever wanna feel like I did that day. Take me to the place I love. Take me all the way. Yeah. Right? So you get the idea. So all I did was I just kind of recreated the language of the harmony, right? So I kept the melody the same, and I actually reduced the chord progression. So here's the original. Sometimes I feel like I don't have a partner. Sometimes I feel like my only friend. Alright, so I'm adding a few things into there, which is just stock piano. Well, specifically stock rock piano. We just add in the nines. Gives you that cool fourth sound. So it'll give you that kind of a sound. You sound like Bruce Hornsby, basically. Okay, that's like kind of a Bruce Hornsby-esque sort of way to play. Others just like to play around like that, so they'll just do 4-3-2-3. That'll usually happen in a ballad. Another piano trick, especially a piano composition trick, and subsequently an improvisational trick, is to play the 4 over the 5. This was incredibly popular in the 70s, especially with pianists like Elton John, Billy Joel. So you can incorporate that, assuming you don't have a guitar player playing with you, because if a bassist is playing G, I can just play F over him. Right? So all I did was basically, with all that soloing, I was implying this. And that back to 1 sounds like that. So here's 1, 4, 4 over 5. And back to the 1. So that is a strong point of mine, doing the slash chord thing. So I just kind of automatically build that into what I'm writing. And it's also obviously easier to improvise over your own arrangements because it all comes from the same brain. So it's not like somebody wrote giant steps out for you and you had to figure out how to modulate between each 2/5, you know? So now we're going to take a look at the pentatonic scale, which is 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 8. That almost is a pentatonic scale, but it puts C in there. Anyway, well, like the Tennessee Waltz. That's all the pentatonic scale. And the pentatonic scale is a go-to for guitarists and keyboardists alike, especially when you're just playing over 3 chords. Here we're going to be using Freebird, the ending specifically. Now, I want you to note that I played only 3 notes when I did that, okay? And rhythm also obviously plays into this. Now let's add E. Whoops. So now let's add E. 2, 3. Now, as you experiment with this, you notice that you have to avoid the B for everything except for the G, right? So this is where my blue note thing comes in. I'm just using the freaking blues scale. Okay. So finding a hybrid between those two is basically the challenge, because you don't want it all to sound like it's the same scale. So I generally will just add a few notes to the standard blues scale. I like playing the 7th. So the flat 7, the 7th, and the 8th, because, you know, I'm crazy like that. So here's that hybrid. Okay, so let's take a look at just that little... So all I did was I was droning my G underneath. And that was kind of all I did. I did some rolls off the... Now alone, that sounds repetitive, but when you put the same thing over different chords... well, I guess you'd have to do... So I had to start that way because this disagreed so much as a first sound, you know? So it worked in the context of my other solo, because you got used to hearing me skating with this blues scale, right? But when we just start with that, it's slightly offensive to the ear. So what I did was I just played the major, and then I played the minor. So major, whoops. So major, minor, right? And you can even play that as a background or something over the guitarist, who's probably going to take easily a 6-minute solo against these changes. And they tend to use the G pentatonic. And they really love to use 5, 6, and 1. So you can do that too, because you know, it's not like you can't do stuff guitarists can't. So, so you may want to add in some guitarish things to what you're doing, especially when you're playing rock. And one of those is playing off of 5/6 to the 1. That, or just, just some simple stuff. And that's the name of the game. You don't want to approach improvising like, oh, I want to impress everyone. I just want to play 16th notes all day or whatever, because it just sounds mechanical. I prefer a much more natural sounding solo myself. A natural solo is a little bit more rewarding and a little bit more lyrical. So in a nutshell, forget about, okay, I'm playing D minor, so this is Dorian. I'm playing G7, so this is Mixolydian. Like, that's helpful to a very certain point, because then your solos just sound like, it's all the same, but when I add in, other stuff, it sounds cooler, right? So you want to find kind of a yin-yang of having licks that you go to that are fast and impressive, but also try to play a melodic solo. Try to be artisty with what you're doing, because when people, especially saxophonists nowadays, they just play like a million notes a minute and it becomes meaningless, So try to emote with your solos and just keep stuff simple. Take it easy, kids.